Well, Jake Paul's attorney says he was out of state and not at his Calabasas home during that raid today. The FBI says they're investigating allegations of criminal acts. Today, YouTube star Jake Paul is making headlines after an FBI raid at his home in Calabasas. Sky 5 was over the scene Wednesday morning as federal agents entered Paul's home in a gated community off Mulholland Highway. 24 feds, some in tactical gear, could be seen carrying evidence from the property, including several firearms. After the search, a SWAT team was seen leaving in a procession of law enforcement vehicles.
Jake Paul joking about steroids, regardless of the aim, felt like a self-inflicted cut because bravado under scrutiny doesn't look like innocence. It looks like defiance. And when old testing issues like VADA return, patterns suddenly look sharper than they ever did in isolation.
At any point, did you start to take your foot off the gas just a little bit because you noticed he was tiring out?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a bit. You know, I wanted to give the fans a show, but I didn't want to hurt someone that didn't need to be hurt.
Did you carry Mike?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. Yeah, like there was a point where, you know, I was just like, okay, he's not really engaging back. And so I don't know if he's tired or whatever. And I could just tell, you know, his age was showing a little bit. And I just have so much respect for him. And that like violence war thing between us, like after he slapped me, I wanted to, you know, be aggressive and take him down and knock him out and all that stuff. But that kind of went away as the rounds went on.
So that no PR squad, no lawyer, no podcast tour can scrub away once people really stare at it. What truly changed after the Joshua fight was not the defeat itself, but the crowd's behavior, because fans stopped laughing and started probing, slowing clips, matching timelines, and once viewers turn into analysts, the circus phase ends and liability takes the lead.
Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson was 100% scripted. Mike Tyson repeatedly bit his boxing gloves throughout the fight. When fights are scripted, fighters do weird gestures to signal that they're hurt. It's very possible Mike Tyson was biting on his glove to tell Jake Paul to calm down. Now, if that's not enough proof that this fight was scripted, in the middle of the fight, Mike Tyson is literally talking to Jake Paul while they are clinched.
The Calabasas raid images matter because optics often override excuses, and aerial shots of federal agents taking evidence from a mansion burn into public memory, forming a benchmark that no press note, charity mention, or hype speech can fully erase. This leap from influencer bouts to heavyweight exposure to federal eyes occurred with shocking speed, raising the uneasy query of who thought momentum was safety, because history is full of icons who thought brands were bulletproof right before reality stepped in. Anthony Joshua leaves this chapter largely unhurt.
That's definitely a crazy fight because of the weight differences. The weight difference in there, I only know one man that'll do the weight difference like that, and that's the Bronze Bomber. You know, for me, in my opinion, I think it's scripted a little bit because, you know, of the weight difference, and, you know, Joshua is a former, you know, champion. And also, you know, he's active, you know, and this is going to be the first time that we see Paul, you know, fighting an active fighter. You know what I mean? We seen the Mike Tyson, that was all fun, that was cute, you know what I'm saying? It's fun and games and stuff, but now you're dealing with a real professional, you know.
His seriousness cementing his legacy, while Jake Paul meets a harsher junction, because his fame was built on silencing doubters, and now those doubts are mainstream debate rather than fringe noise, which is a brutal spot to exist publicly. For a win, it's accountability ringing louder than ever before. And whether Jake Paul unlocks that door or blocks it will decide how history recalls this era.
Discussion, any agreement about, hey, you need to get the fight into this round, you need to carry him for X amount of rounds, you need to do your part to get it into the 5th, 6th, or whatever.
Absolutely no way ever. I mean, if you look at a couple of the right hands that AJ missed with in the first couple of rounds, like they would have done the same job on Jake's jaw if they would have landed. And Jake did very well to avoid them. So I always said going into the fight, AJ's not the kind of guy that's going to come out like a train, just start swinging away. He's going to take his time. And that's what he did. You know, the fight definitely went a few more rounds than anticipated from Anthony. But it's like, even now, it's like, yeah, it was definitely a fix. Some guy commented today on one of my posts, yeah, it was definitely a fix. I go, you do know that he's broken his jaw in 2 places.
Not the fight itself. I keep looking at Anthony Joshua because he didn't just beat Jake Paul. He broke a narrative by being a poised pro-heavyweight who proved what happens when true grit meets managed spectacle. And the scary part is that Joshua didn't posture or hunt clout. He simply did his job and left behind footage that challenges months of neatly guided hopes. Jake Paul's fighting persona was engineered around control of opponents, control of tempo, control of messaging, and control of results. And when that grip slipped across multiple rounds under Anthony Joshua's firm pressure, the shockwave wasn't limited to the ring.
California mansion has been raided by the FBI, multiple news organizations report. You can see in this aerial footage agents in uniform outside his home in Calabasas. Ernie told Reuters he would cooperate with the federal investigation.
What gonna look like after his boxing career?
People think I do steroids and all this shit, so I have a plan because I think it's fucking bizarre. That's like the only excuse they can come up with is like rigged fights. Jake Paul does steroids. So after boxing, I'm gonna do a cycle of steroids to show people what Jake Paul on steroids actually looks like, because I want to shut people the fuck up.
It surged through promoters, defenders, and fans who suddenly felt the brand wobble in real time. I don't think Logan Paul lacks smarts, which is exactly why the sudden quiet, the cautious words, and the clear stress matter. Because people who know media loops rarely retreat unless they spot factors they cannot outsmart. And that stance looks less like belief and more like crisis management. Mike Tyson's name became an emotional crack for fans because legends carry decades of muscle memory. And when a 60-year-old icon acts in ways that feel strange, viewers naturally rewind footage, analyze moments, and ask questions.
There has never once in Jake Paul's career been any talk of that sort, of anything to do with the fight being anything but a real fight that has exactly the same situation as any professional fight. And that's exactly the same thing here for the Anthony Joshua fight. It's just beyond mind-blowing that people would think that. Anthony Joshua was on record saying that if he didn't finish him in the first round, that would be disappointing, that it would be a failure. The narrative changed as we got closer to fight night and obviously post-fight, and I understand why, but they were pretty adamant it would take max 2 rounds to knock out Jake Paul.
And once analysis replaces reaction, the narrative drive shifts permanently. Eddie Hearn's guarding tone stood out, because promoters are comfortable in gray zones, yet his spin sounded like someone expecting heat rather than waving off trash. And when the word investigation is raised theoretically, it invites people to wonder why that possibility is even being noted. The leaked Tyson script continues to hang because true plots are never perfectly clean. They are messy and partly linked, and when enough points overlap roughly, it feels less like fan fiction and more like a rough working draft.
Let me know your thoughts on Jake going 6 rounds with AJ.
You know, the fact that he did that, it was good because, you know, we didn't think it was going to go 6 rounds. We thought it was going to go 2. So the fact that he made 6 rounds is an accomplishment for Jake Paul.
Was there anything that stuck out with you from the fight?
Yeah, really, who was in better shape? I thought that Joshua was in great shape compared to, you know, Jake Paul, because he was running around the ring.
You guys gotta walk,
and that takes out a lot of energy, especially when you're not used to it.
Especially once Anthony Joshua's showing amplified existing fears. Paulie Malignaggi's commentary hit home because it didn't sound bitter or personal. It sounded analytical and almost relieved. Like a veteran seeing that public views are finally catching up to private chats. Fighters have had for years, and when that syncing happens, credibility quietly swaps hands. Nakisa Badarian's media spots added fuel rather than light, because repeatedly noting boxing's dirty past while claiming full purity doesn't calm skeptical fans. It reminds them how thin the line is between show and rigging in a sport that has burned trust before. I want to be clear with myself as I continue this story that what we're really talking about is optics, pressure, and fallout, not verdicts. Because in boxing and star culture, damage often hits long before facts are set, and Jake Paul is now living inside that awkward gap. What stands out is how names like Anthony Joshua suddenly feel symbolic rather than random. Because AJ shows an old-school code where training, risk, and legacy matter more than clicks, and when that code collides with influencer-era boxing, The contrast is impossible to ignore. Jake Paul didn't just lose control in the ring, he lost grip on the conversation. And once public dialogue slips outside your hands, especially when reporters, fighters, and pundits all start asking similar questions, it becomes nearly impossible to steer things back with charisma alone. I keep thinking about how Eddie Hearn treats moments like this, because he's seen careers rise and crash across decades, and his care felt less like distancing and more like recognition that the climate had changed, and the usual tricks wouldn't work anymore. Logan Paul's silence continues to feel strategic rather than emotional, because he understands that sometimes saying nothing saves optionality, and when the future is blurry, optionality becomes more valuable than loyalty vows or quick defenses. Mike Tyson's role still troubles fans, because legends occupy sacred space, and when that space feels tainted, people don't just question the moment. They question everything around it, including who benefits and who stays protected. Paulie Malignaggi's bluntness cuts through noise precisely because he doesn't gain anything from exaggeration. And when someone like him speaks calmly instead of angrily, it gives weight to the idea that this isn't about personal beef. It's about structural unease. Nakisa Badarian's frequent references to boxing's messy history almost work against the message, because reminding people that corruption exists doesn't reassure them. It's absent now. It reminds them why skepticism is rational. Jake Paul's confidence, which once felt magnetic, now feels risky, because confidence without clarity can look like avoidance. And in moments like this, audiences crave transparency more than bravado. The betting conversations are what truly change the tone, because once fans suspect money flow influences outcomes, entertainment transforms into ethical concern, and ethical concern invites outside scrutiny that no promoter can fully contain. Anthony Joshua's professionalism almost acts like a mirror, reflecting what discipline looks like when nothing is manufactured, and that reflection quietly reshapes how audiences judge everyone else involved. What's striking is how fast fans learn to slow footage, analyze body signs, and compare statements, because once people feel fooled, they become investigators by instinct. The Calabasas imagery lingers not because of legal weight, but because visuals tell stories faster than facts. And once that story enters public consciousness, it becomes part of the narrative whether anyone likes it or not. Jake Paul's brand was built on disruption, but disruption without trust eventually collapses under its own noise, and rebuilding trust is far harder than building attention. I don't think Jake Paul lacks resilience, but resilience alone doesn't fix credibility, and credibility is the currency now being questioned across every platform. Anthony Joshua doesn't need to comment, because his career doesn't depend on controlling narratives, and that difference matters more than any punch thrown. Boxing as a whole feels uneasy watching this unfold, because every controversy reinforces the sport's oldest wounds, and honest fighters pay the reputational price for someone else's spectacle. The uncomfortable truth is that influencer boxing blurred lines too successfully, and now those blurred lines are being examined under harsh light that doesn't care about entertainment value. Silence from key figures feels louder each day, because silence usually means preparation, not ignorance, and preparation suggests anticipation of what comes next, rather than confidence that nothing will. I don't see this moment as an ending, but as a forced pause, the kind where careers either mature or unravel depending on how honestly they respond to pressure. In the end, Jake Paul's next chapter won't be defined by Anthony Joshua, Mike Tyson, Logan Paul, or Eddie Hearn, but by whether he confronts skepticism with substance instead of spectacle. Because once trust is broken, only reality can rebuild it.